All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Smith, and along with my friend David Sandeman, we're here to dive into the closure of a small Japanese university, referred to here as University W. Also, we're going to look into the impact to those connected to it. So, this isn't just a story about like one university shutting down. It's a broader narrative on the challenges faced by higher education in Japan, and to be honest, globally, in a time of market-driven reforms and declining enrollments due to declining birth rates. So, when universities close, it forces us to think about the bigger forces shaping education. In Japan, a few decades of neoliberal, market-driven policies have turned a once supposedly meritocratic system into a competitive sink-or-swim environment aimed at boosting economic efficiency. The number of universities exploded from 507 in 1990 to 803 in 2023. But with fewer 18-year-olds, down from 2 million in 1990 to 1.1 million today, smaller schools are struggling. So University W is one of them. In 2023, its parent corporation announced it would shut down within 4 years, citing declining birth rates and student preferences for bigger, co-ed universities. It's not alone. Many small private universities have closed or merged in recent decades. This study looks at how students and alumni are dealing with University W's closure. Using Schlossberg's transition model, it explores how people make sense of and adapt to the change. The goal is to understand the human impact of these closures and spark conversations about more balanced and inclusive educational policies. To do so, we address the following research question. How do current and former students at a small Japanese university make sense of and adapt to its impending closure?
Thanks, Mike. Around the year 2000, Japan shifted its education system to follow a market-driven, outcome-focused model rooted in neoliberalism and new public management. New public management treats everything, including education, as a business, driven by three core principles: management, measurement, and marketization. This means less state control, more focus on results and performance metrics, and competition between institutions, with the market deciding winners and losers. For Japanese universities, this has brought pressure to innovate, diversify funding, and partner with industries. Public universities were turned into corporations in 2004, with operational funding cut by 1% annually and grants reduced by 3%. These changes have forced institutions to compete for resources and students, but success often favors large, well-funded universities with better infrastructure and brand recognition. Smaller colleges, on the other hand, face an uphill battle. Limited budgets, weaker reputations, and fewer resources make it hard to survive in a system designed for competition. These challenges can create a cycle of struggle and potential closure. The loss of small universities doesn't just impact education. It affects social connections and cultural hubs, leaving students, alumni, and staff feeling disconnected and adrift.
Cheers, Dave. Okay, so getting on to how we actually analysed our data, our conceptual model was Schlossberg's transition model. So, of course, losing one's alma mater is a major life change. So Schlossberg's model offers a framework for understanding how people process significant life events. So transitions here are defined as any event or non-event that alter one's relationships, routines, assumptions, and roles, and simultaneously requires new patterns of behavior that may or may not be effective. What makes this model unique is its focus on the individual's perception of the change. According to Schlossberg, the meaning of a transition is determined by the person experiencing it, making the approach highly personal and nuanced. So transitions can be categorized into three broad types. Anticipated transitions, which, as you expect, events expected to happen like graduating or starting a new job. Unanticipated transitions, so these are sudden, unexpected events like losing a job, or in this case, the closure of university. And non-event transitions, so anticipated outcomes that don't occur, such as not receiving a promotion or failing to graduate. So the close of University W falls under unanticipated transitions, creating challenges for everyone connected to the system. Okay, so now we've determined the type of transition, we need to break down the 4S system. So the Schlossberg's model organizes coping resources into 4 categories, known as the 4S's. So number 1 is the situation. So what triggered the transition? In this case, external factors like decline in enrollment and broader policy pressures, such as those described by Dave, led to University W's closure. Next, we move on to the self. This refers to an individual's internal resources like their personality, values, resilience, and so on. The stuff that influence their ability to cope. 3 is support. So these are the external resources available, such as the university community, alum networks, and college services. And finally, we have strategies. Actions that individuals take to manage the situation, such as problem solving, reframing the event, or seeking emotional support. So Caruso highlights that people who use multiple strategies to cope are generally more successful in navigating transitions, which makes sense. For those affected by University W's closure, these strategies might include leaning on social networks, seeking professional guidance, or finding ways to reframe the loss. We thought it was important to understand different perspectives. Of course, people experience transitions differently depending on their life stage, connection to the institution, and so on. So we couldn't really do it longitudinally because of the nature of the study itself, but what we could do is take a longitudinal perspective in terms of current students, recent graduates, and long-term alumni. So current students, these are the individuals that face immediate concerns like graduating on time, planning their next step. So their testimonies reveal the short-term coping strategies and immediate emotional reactions. Recent grads, a little bit more nuanced. This group reflects on how the closure impacts their early careers and relationship with the university. So their insights highlight the transitional phase from education to employment, known as the Shakaijin transition in Japan. And finally, long-term alum. These individuals often focus on the university's legacy and traditions, providing a broader perspective on the university's place in their lives and community. So as you can see, Schlossberg's model is a great fit for this research because it really captures the complexity of experiences. However, there is limited literature applying her framework to university closure. Previous studies like Caldwell's exploration of US college closure emphasize the importance of community relationships and the emotional toll of such events, while more recently, Caruso examined the impact of closure on university staff, finding that transparency and institutional support were often lacking. So, given the scarcity of research in this area, especially in Japan, our study aims to fill this gap by shedding light on how individuals process and adapt to the closure of a university.
Thanks, Mike. Well, to help you guys understand the background, we'll just give you a brief overview of University W, its history, its reputation, and its challenges. Located in Western Japan, University W offers liberal arts degrees and is part of an escalator gakko system. This means students can move through affiliated schools without entrance exam. The corporation behind it runs well-regarded female-only kindergartens, elementary, junior high, and high schools. Its high schools are especially prestigious. Just last year, around 200 grads got into top private universities like Kwansei Gakuin, Kansai, Doshisha, and Nitsumeikan. However, University W is struggling. In spring 2023, it enrolled just 24 new students, far below its capacity. To do our analysis, we used interpretive phenomenological analysis to explore how current and former students at a small Japanese university make sense of its closure. IPA is all about digging deep into personal experiences, making it perfect for understanding significant changes. It relies on semi-structured interviews and works best with small, focused groups of participants, usually 3 to 6 people. For this study, we used purposive and snowball sampling to find current students, recent grads, and long-term alumni of University W. Since people interpret events based on their unique perspectives, IPA acknowledges bias as inevitable but manageable. Researchers aim to set aside preconceptions and focus on participants' views. We keep reflexive diaries to track how our own thoughts might influence the process. So, what we did is we conducted 60 to 90-minute interviews giving participants full transparency about the study, their rights, and confidentiality. They provided pseudonyms, and we followed ethical guidelines to ensure their comfort and safety. Interviews were recorded and transcribed, including non-verbal cues like laughter or pauses. Following Smith et al.'s 2022 7-step IPA process, we started by immersing ourselves in the first transcript, noting descriptive, conceptual, and linguistic details. We developed experimental statements capturing what mattered to participants, then looked for connections across these statements to create themes. After repeating this process for all cases, we identified group-level themes, comparing and contrasting shared experiences. This method helped us deeply understand how people navigate and interpret the closure of their university, offering valuable insights into the human side of higher educational challenges.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, so in terms of unpacking ongoing transitions, i.e. our results section, we break it down into the 4S system. So, beginning with the situation, we notice the market tensions and institutional entropy. So, using Schlossberg's model, we explore group-level testimonies reflecting the external triggers and stresses experienced by stakeholders as they navigate University W's closure. So, within the framework of new public management, which, as Dave mentioned, prioritizes competitive efficiency and market demand, current students' reflections reveal how the invisible hand of capitalism, the Adam Smith metaphor, though not explicitly mentioned, shapes perceptions of the university's decline. As Ball et al. Argue, students' decision-making is influenced by the right course and institution. While University W used to be a very prestigious women's university, according to Elizabeth, its single-gender enrollment model, as described by Mary, niche majors, as described by Harry, and decline appeal, as described by Takara, signify the institutional entropy. In Japan's increasingly neoliberal education system, restricting female-only tracks for liberal arts degrees narrows career options, making it natural for students to seek institutions offering diverse, market-aligned programs. Recent graduate Rika and long-term alum Elizabeth also cite inadequate advertising as a factor in the university's diminished visibility. A lack of effective branding compounds the institution's decline competitiveness, reinforcing consumer apathy. From a Foucauldian perspective, university advertising is not just a tool for visibility, but a mechanism for embedding neoliberal subjectivities. Marketing shapes students into rational, competitive consumers of education, and ineffective campaigns diminish University W's perceived value. These accounts underscore pragmatic understanding of University W's position in Japan's social Darwinist, survival of the fittest academic landscape. Rika highlights weak branding as a key factor, while Elizabeth and Maria's reflections acknowledge broader systematic pressures. Together, these insights illustrate the challenges small-scale colleges face in an increasingly hierarchized higher education sector, where stagnation leads to closure. In terms of the self, meanwhile, we see how students and alum process and rationalize loss. Current students like Harry, Mary, and Takara express immediate sadness, feeling the loss of the university as a community and a space for identity. Harry reflects on how they won't be able to return to meet their teachers, while Takara feels for future students who won't have the same experience. Rika, a recent graduate, shows a more indifferent attitude, stating that she and her peers don't really care much about the closure. For Elizabeth, a long-term alum, the initial sadness fades and she focuses on how the closure might affect future career competition. Maria, another alum, expresses no strong emotions, seeing the university's closure as part of a transactional relationship. These varying responses show how the loss is processed differently at different stages. Current students mourn the loss of a community that helped them form identities, while graduates and alums shift to a more pragmatic view. Rika's indifference represents a distancing process, while Elizabeth and Maria's rational response reflect a career-focused mindset, common in neoliberal society. Their responses also highlight the transitions from grief to acceptance of the closure and a recognition of the market-driven forces that led to the university's downfall. Next, in terms of support, we noticed commercialized guidance through the transition. So this theme explores how external resources, such as university faculty and community, influence students' processing of University W's closure. Current students like Mary and Harry benefit from close, supportive relationships with teachers and small class sizes, which provide personalized guidance as they face the emotional and logistical challenges of the transition. However, concerns about academic support and integrity arise as the closure's timeframe limits the university's ability to grant credits. In contrast, Takara expresses self-reliance, seeing herself as responsible for her academic progress. Takara's perspective, meanwhile, aligns with the neoliberal emphasis on individual responsibility over collective support, reflecting a broader shift in higher education towards personal autonomy. While she feels unsupported, it might also reflect her choice to rely on herself rather than institutional resources. Rika suggests that faculty might lower standards to help students graduate, raising concerns about the balance between alleviating student challenges and maintaining academic rigour. This concern underscores the pressures of the new public management model, where universities are increasingly focused on producing market-ready graduates and commodifying education as a transaction. Maria, a long-term alum, observes the university's shift from community-oriented ethos to a more commercialised one, as seen in the treatment of the reunion committee. This shift reflects broader concerns about the commercialisation of education, where the institution prioritises financial gain over community building. Maria's frustration with the alumni committee's exploitation highlights the growing transactional nature of the university's operation. Rika further critiques the university's narrow focus on tourism and job hunting support, showing how the university's commercial approach limits the scope of its support, focusing on sectors that align with its economic interests, leaving students pursuing other careers marginalised. Meanwhile, Takara's seemingly indifferent response to career centre guidance reveals a shift in responsibility towards students themselves, as the university encourages students to seek external support. Finally, the strategy or proactive suggestions for circumventing closure. This theme examines the coping strategies employed by long-term alums, recent grads and current students in response to University W's closure, focused on their proposals for institutional, economic and pedagogical reforms. These proactive strategies reflect a desire to modify or manage the situation through problem solving and reframing. Maria's lack of suggestions reflects the uncertainty and helplessness that can arise when facing unexpected transitions, especially those driven by large-scale institutional challenges. Elizabeth's call for significant structural changes, while practical, may appear idealistic given the reality of University W's precarious position. On the other hand, Rika and Takara suggest economic incentives such as financial aid or lower tuition fees, which they see as ways to attract more students. These suggestions align with a utilitarian approach to problem solving, focused on the immediate economic factors that could alleviate University W's enrolment issues. However, while these solutions are plausible, they fail to address the systematic challenges small-scale schools face in an increasingly competitive educational market. Meanwhile, Harry's suggestion for open classes could have served as a marketing strategy, offering transparent engagement with the community and showcasing the university's value. Mary's proposal for increased volunteer activities suggests a way for University W to integrate more meaningfully with its local context, preparing students for the workforce while promoting the institution as socially responsible. These ideas highlight a desire for the university to emphasise practical skills and community involvement, which might have helped position it more competitively within the overall educational market. However, as Rika and Harry suggestions focus on skill building, such as language and computer skills, they reflect the growing trend of colleges prioritising employability and economic productivity over broader educational goals. In the knowledge economy, where students are viewed as human capital, the emphasis on skill development aligns with the expectations that individuals manage their careers as businesses. These proposals reflect the broader economic imperatives that shape educational success, narrowing the definition of success to economic productivity.
Cheers, Mike. This study provides critical insight into the systemic forces at play in the closure of University W, contributing to a broader understanding of the impact of neoliberalism and market-driven reforms on higher education. The analysis explores how market mechanisms reshape the educational landscape, emphasizing the commodification of education and its implication for both institutions and students. Okay? So, one major point is the market mechanisms and the commodification of education. So at the heart of this study, we see the shift on the role of universities from educational institutions to service providers in a competitive neoliberal marketplace. As educational institutions are increasingly viewed as businesses, they are forced to adapt to market demands, where students are seen as consumers. This consumer-driven model encourages institutions to prioritize economic productivity and employability, reducing education to a transaction focused on producing human capital rather than fostering epistemic diversity. University W's closure exemplifies this shift, as its inability to compete within the oversaturated Japanese higher education market ultimately led to its decline. The second major point was neoliberalism's impact on education as a public good. Okay? So, what we can see here is the damaging effects of neoliberalism, particularly the influence of new public management on the preservation of educational institutions. The focus on financial viability and economic outcomes over academic quality and community engagement erode the foundational role of universities as public goods. This process, which commodifies both academic credentials and students themselves, reflects broader global trends in higher education, where the market determines the survival of institutions based on their ability to deliver measurable economic outcomes. The third major point that came out of this study was the role of stakeholders in navigating institutional change. While the findings are based on a small sample of stakeholders at University W, they provide valuable insights into the way students, alumni, and faculty navigate the impending closure. Current students express sadness and loss, particularly around the disruption of their community, while alumni adopt a more pragmatic, career-focused outlook. This shift in perspective from emotional attachment to economic rationalization illustrates the growing subjectification of students as economic actors in a neoliberal system. The study underscores the importance of institutional support, with close student-teacher relationships providing some emotional stability during this transition. However, concerns over academic integrity and the transactional nature of university support highlight the challenges of maintaining educational values in a market-driven environment. Our fourth major impact from the study was the notice of proactive strategies for institutional survival. Participants in the study also suggested strategies to avoid the closure of the university, including structural reforms, financial incentives, and pedagogic changes. Proposals such as lowering tuition fees, increasing scholarships, offering open classes, and emphasizing skill-based learning reflect a practical approach to addressing the institution's decline. However, these suggestions also reveal the limitations of economic incentivization in the face of broader systemic issues. While financial strategies may provide short-term relief, they fail to address the deeper challenges posed by marketization and the commodification of education. Our fifth major point was the implications for educational preservation and future research. Okay? So this study calls for a critical rethinking of how universities are structured and evaluated within a neoliberal framework. It emphasizes the need for more qualitative research that explores the lived experience of those affected by university closures, highlighting the importance of idiographic accounts in understanding the complex realities of institutional decline. By amplifying diverse voices, future research can offer more nuanced solutions for the preservation of educational institutions before they are forced into irreversible decline.
Cheers, Dave. So, in conclusion, the closure of University W serves as a microcosm of the larger challenges facing higher education in a neoliberal world. The study reveals how market forces, economic rationality, and the commodification of education shape the narrative surrounding institutional survival and the broader sociological impact of university closures. It also calls for further exploration of these dynamics to develop strategies that can help safeguard the future of higher education, ensure it remains a space for intellectual and social growth, not just economic production. If you found our presentation interesting, please feel free to reach out us in the future and we'll guide you to the study from which this presentation was drawn, which will hopefully be published in the first half of 2025. Apart from that, thanks for your attendance, and from both Dave and I, we hope you have a great time at the conference and we hope to bump into you soon. Okay, thank you. Bye.